So I'd like just to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And for our New Zealand counterparts, Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. And I'm joined today by Sharon Horton, Dr. Sharon Horton, who was supported the review of this guideline. We engaged over a year ago, and really glad that Sharon's here to help give us an insight into how the review is done and what's changed. And then we've got Susannah Roelofsz, who is our technical officer at the Fresh Produce Safety Centre. Just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. So I'll just give a quick intro into the new guidelines, acknowledge all those that have supported the review, and then a bit of the context into the background and why we've developed these guidelines and why we've done this review. I'll then hand over to Sharon, who'll give us a bit of an insight into how the guidelines were reviewed and what's new and what's changed. There are some minor changes, there are some big changes. She'll give us an insight into that. And then I'll hand over to Susannah, who will probably bring us on to the next stage, is like, how are we going to use these guidelines and who are they for? I'll then wrap up with a bit of a next steps for the guidelines and what we're looking to do next. And after that, we'll have questions and answers. So hopefully that's our next half hour. And thanks again for joining us for this. So this is why we're here today. Absolutely delighted to be announcing that we've launched the fundamental guidelines last week online. We've had really good uptake from people. People are excited to see the new guidelines. It's been a few years since we've done a review, so this has been overdue in some ways, but I'm, as I say, very proud of what we've done. It has been a major undertaking, so it shouldn't be underestimated how much work has gone into this review. And I think it's just been a really important resource for growers and for the wider horticulture sector. We've also developed quick guides, which is summary of each chapter. You'll see one-pagers getting to the point from a grower's perspective, something that they can use day to day, and if they need more information, they could get into the fundamental guidelines, which Susannah will get into a little bit more info on later on. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them yet, they're on our website. You can scan this QR code and download or have a look at them online. So starting there, and then now hoping we're just going to get into a little bit of the background on why and a deep dive into the guidelines themselves. So this wouldn't have been possible without our funders. We have a project called the Horticulture Food Safety Initiative, and that's been funded by Horton Innovation primarily as our main partner, and delighted to have had their support for adding the guidelines into that project, guidelines review. And then our co-funders, sincere thanks for adding additional funding into the project to support this comprehensive review that we've undertaken. So thanks to everyone who has provided money for it to make this possible. I'd also like to thank the technical team led by Sharon, and we've had a range of people across academia and industry and growers just to bring that breadth of knowledge and practical insight into the guidelines review. And again, wouldn't have been possible without their input, mostly volunteering time. So thanks especially to this group for the review. I'd also like to thank those that were just peer reviewers of the guidelines. So when we got to draft versions, we shared them with key people across the industry and globally to provide their insights into the updated version. And so again, we wouldn't have been able to get to this stage without their input. So thanks very much. And also, we haven't started from scratch. This is a review of existing guidelines. We've got 4 versions up here, and there's been significant work has gone in over the last 10, 15 years into guidelines. So thanks for everyone who's put their time and effort into previous versions, because that's what we're really building on. We're not starting from scratch. So why do we need guidelines? I think there's a few key things that are specific for horticulture where we don't have a kill step in the supply chain, and that means that food safety risks need to be managed on farm, and that is a very much of a preventative step where we say, well, let's try and prevent contamination happening in the first place so that we don't have to worry about it later. We've also had fresh produce linked to foodborne illness globally and Australia and in New Zealand, and then even just from a business perspective, the level of recalls is a huge financial impact on the sector. So we think food safety is an ongoing issue for the sector, and we want to make sure that we're not making people sick, but also not having that business impact through disruptions and recalls. Also then, well, so what from a grower's perspective, they're having to manage that risk on farm, and that's leading to a lot of information being developed, a lot of research has been done, a lot of standards have been developed. But from a grower's perspective, it can be complicated, can be confusing. Where do we go to get this information? And sometimes it's difficult to navigate, well, what do I actually need to do on farm? And also there's the concept about trust. Can they actually trust the information that they're reading? So Fresh Produce Safety Centre has been established to be that trusted custodian, and we've developed these user-friendly guidelines more as a how-to to meet these food safety regulations and assurance or requirements or food safety standards. And we think that it's really important that it's a voluntary guideline so that growers can adopt good practice. We also want to be able to take an industry-led approach to making progress in food safety rather than it, primarily being a regulatory thing or a standards-based approach. You can say we have these guidelines that are based in science, they're user-friendly, and that's much more engaging from a grower's perspective to adopt the latest good practice. So at this point, I'd like to kind of give an insight into who they're for. And there are a range of users, but I think primarily it's for growers and for pack houses. We go up to that post-harvest handling, and as mentioned earlier, because food safety risk is primarily an on-farm thing that needs to be managed, the users of the guidelines are primarily growers. But growers don't operate in isolation. There are assurance programs, researchers, and service providers, consultants who all use the guidelines as some people reference them as their Bible, and it's a really important resource for the sector collectively to support that food safety management on farm. While we've developed them for that Australia, New Zealand context, it's still fresh produce, similar hazards and management practices that can be adopted. So we think growers globally could pick these guidelines up and find them useful. And just with that context of it is primarily for the Australia, New Zealand growing environment. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Sharon, who will give us a bit of an insight into how they were reviewed and what's new. So over to you, Sharon.
Thank you. I would like to begin by thanking the 12 outstanding academic and industry experts from Australia and New Zealand who stepped up to take on this challenge. Your enthusiasm and expertise made all the difference. Fortunately, as Damien has mentioned, we weren't starting from scratch. We had a strong guidelines document built on from 2022, which gave us a solid foundation for the 2025 review and update. Early on, it became clear that new chapters were required, particularly around incident management and food safety culture. And right in the middle of our review, a fresh produce recall was unfolding. The real-time event prompted the addition of Appendix 4, which focuses on the significance of fecal indicator bacteria, and also highlighted the need for further work in Chapter 7, Managing Water. The technical review group also flagged allergens as an important hazard to bring into the hazard scope as focus. Given the limited time, we split into subgroups to tackle specific topic areas, and then we came back together to collaborate, align, and agree the final updates. The final version of the guidelines was significantly strengthened by constructive input across the fresh produce industry. We ran 2 rounds of external feedback during insights from Australia, New Zealand, the US, the UK, and Singapore. That feedback helped refine the content and broaden its relevance. A special thank you to Jody and Susannah, who delivered an exceptional result in upgrading the look and feel of the guidelines. The refreshed design and modern imagery have really brought the document to life. Thank you. With final edits complete and board approval secured, we're proud to officially launch the update of the guidelines today. So what's new? definitely the managing critical incidents, which we wrapped into also the recall section, food safety culture, and we also had food safety objectives and also root cause analysis embedded in that chapter. New appendices, the use and significance of fecal indicated bacteria, and thank you to Susannah for completing the section on food safety regulation and insurance programs. I would also like to acknowledge the work completed on updating the glossary of terms through collaboration with FreshCare and HARPS. We were able to align our terminology and ensure consistency in the fresh produce industry. A special thank you to Renata and Lena for your contributions. What's not new in the 2025 is Chapter 6. There was significant in-depth review completed in 2022, so that chapter remains as it was in 2022. Another key shift is the move from the words best practice. The review team were really keen to use good practices. Each chapter now includes the special practical, achievable actions and provides the opportunity for continuous improvement. Here's an example of the guidelines updated imagery. We've included clear visual guidance and acceptable practices and those to be avoided, making it easier for users to interpret it and apply the information from the guidelines. And finally, we refreshed the decision trees. These provide users with a practical way to complete risk assessments, helping users navigate complex decisions with confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Now pass over to Susannah, who's going to give us a bit of an insight into how the guidelines will be used.
Thank you. So as Damien mentioned, we have a broad range of users, but it is anticipated that this will be used directly by growers and packhouses for the most part. And that has two options now. It can either be printed and used in the new user-friendly separate chapters as well as a combined guideline. Or alternatively, it can be accessed online as well in the digital format. So we are hoping for a great uptake, and already Jodie's monitoring accessing and downloads of our fundamental guidelines, and it's really pleasing to see just in 1 week how many users are already engaged in the launch. We can also envision it being used as a training material. As a previous auditor, I know that this used to be my how-to guide, very much so for auditing. And it is around, as Sharon indicated, that good practice as well. It's often referred to as by assurance programs as the how-to guide. So we really have tried to take out some of the thinking behind the scenes so that it can be used ultimately as part of your risk assessments as well. We're really confident that it will be a valuable resource to everyone across the fresh produce supply chain. So just looking at the chapters, we have 20 chapters and 5 appendices. The first 2 chapters, 3 and 4, these are all around what are the food safety hazards associated with fresh produce, but it also looks at sources of contamination as well. As Damien mentioned, in the fresh produce industry, it is all around prevention at the start. So we've really tried to encourage a clear identification of existing hazards, but also emerging hazards as well. Moving on, we have chapters that are all around how to manage these food safety risks once they've been identified, risk assessed, and analysed in accordance with Codex processes and steps. So what we really have focused around every chapter looking at how to manage these food safety risks from a prevention point of view, but also if they do occur, how do we eliminate or reduce them to an acceptable level? And these focus on things like the inputs into product, the environment, both internal and external, people and processes. We're also very pleased to have added 2 new chapters, as Sharon mentioned, one on food safety culture and the other on managing critical incidences, which has now been aligned with recalls as well. As mentioned, we've really highlighted the appendices this time round, as they did get a little bit lost in the previous version. So it's really nice to see them owning themselves as well. Again, we've got 2 new appendices, one looking at that food safety regulations and voluntary assurance programs, This is across Australia and New Zealand. And then we've also added appendices 4, which is around the use and significance of fecal indicator bacteria, as Sharon mentioned, really highlighting the need for constant monitoring and evaluation as these have been associated with some recalls as well. A lot of effort has gone into the review of the glossary of key terms, and as mentioned, it has been aligned with the likes of terminology used in other standards as well. Really exciting on the back end of launching the fundamental guidelines. We're really aware that a 200-page document can always be quite time-consuming when finding things. If you haven't found it in the chapters and you want to, really engage and encourage your staff to use them, we have also developed these quick guides, which will then replace the previously known food safety grower guides. For each chapter, they have been broken down into a one-page, user-friendly, really punchy key points from each chapter, looking at why it is important to implement the practices. What are the actual common food safety hazards for each chapter that we've identified, as well as some of those sources of contamination. We've pulled out the good practice. So what do you need to do to avoid contamination and manage your processes? And then we end each quick guide off with a food safety reminder. Some of these are tips and tricks around things that you can put in over and above, and others also highlight tools, decision trees, or best practice tables if you want more information in the fundamental guidelines. So we're really excited to get these out. It is envisioned that we will also have these translated at some time, but we'd really like your feedback on these quick guides before we go further too. Thanks, Damien.
Thank you, Susannah. So what's next? We've launched the guidelines. We want to get them out there. We've used our channels and our stakeholders, some of you guys on the call today, to help us share these with growers. We really want to get these in the growers' hands. So please support any way you can to increase the awareness of the review and the updated versions. And we're primarily using our industry channels through retailers and insurance programs to get to growers. So that's the first stage. We're getting a lot of queries from people about how we're going to show growers, I suppose, the new content and maybe do some training. And I think at this stage we don't have a huge amount of funding for that. The funding was primarily for the development of the guidelines. So we're collating those ideas from stakeholders on how we would do dissemination. So initially we hadn't been anticipating doing a large print run. However, we've had some requests for printing. So I'm interested in what stakeholders would like, whether it's in terms of printing, workshops. We are intending to do webinars, a series of webinars, probably, kind of one per chapter approach. We've got our podcast, which will have a focus on some of those new areas in the guidelines. And we've also had a suggestion about an audiobook, which I really like. So we're all ears when it comes to the ideas, but we will have to scope them out and get them funded. As Susannah said, we are also looking at doing translations for the quick guides, because the Horticulture Food Safety Initiative project does cover extension and outreach for the smaller operators, English second language. So that is included in scope. And so to follow on from that, once we have the ideas, we are looking at how we might scope out the next steps and seek some additional funding. So we have that existing project with the Horticulture Food Safety Initiative. There's potential to look at variation to that to see if we could add in more support for growers through things like workshops and printing, as I've mentioned. And we very much do rely on our voluntary contributions from industry, retailers, regulators, and Horticulture Food Safety Initiative. So with Hort Innovation. So if you are interested in providing funding or additional funding, please contact me and we can have a discussion about that. We're also intrigued to hear what people think about the guidelines. Please share your feedback. Susannah is our technical officer, and we're really keen to hear what you like about them, if there are any gaps, and what changes you'd like to see, because we are already thinking about the next version and what research needs to be done to fill gaps and to update chapters. So please provide feedback now, and that enables us to continue this process of updating guidelines on a regular basis with feedback from the users. That's what we really want to hear. Then if you've got a technical query about what's in the guidelines, what do you mean about this practice in Chapter 5, well then please contact our help desk, and myself, Susannah, will be able to provide you support. We do want people to be able to use the guidelines. If there are any concerns about interpretation or where the information's come from, please reach out and we can support with that. And the help desk is much wider than the guidelines. Any food safety query, we can take that, and if it's to do with your assurance program, we'll direct you in their way to answer that query. So really good resource that's been enabled through the Horticulture Food Safety Initiative as well. So please make use of it. And then I'd just like to finish off by acknowledging all of the supporters of the Horticulture Food Safety Initiative. Mentioned earlier on that this webinar is the focus is the guidelines and the additional funding that people provided for that. But we have a much bigger project, as I mentioned earlier, that's supporting the rollout of the regulations in Australia and then supporting those smaller operators. So a huge thanks to all of our supporters and also those who provide in-kind support who might not be on this list, because it does take a village to improve food safety outcomes across the sector. So thank you everyone who's contributed to that project.